Hey everyone, it's me. Hi, I'm John. John Solo, man of action. Anyways, I'm up here in the control room and I'm introducing the story time for this lovely book, this Blood Red Moon by Patty Logan. We call her little Patty Logan around here. It's actually Night of the Blood Red Moon, and it's the first book in the Prosper Woods Wolves series. This is a spin-off from the Prosper Woods Chronicles series we all love so much. Supernatural, well, actually, I have the blurb here. Let me tell you all about it. An old-fashioned breeches ripper with a tooth and claw twist. By the way, I've got like the fan from Mother. Mother's working tonight. So, hey, this isn't my booth, you understand. Being the prince of all werewolves sucks. Almost 10 years ago, I did my duty. I should read this in the character's accent because this is all done in Castor. Being the prince of all werewolves sucks. Almost 10 years ago, I did my duty and married a female even though I was desperately in love with an older man. When she died giving birth to a child who could never take the throne, I ran. I left home, shrinking my responsibilities, knowing eventually they'd catch up to me. Well, they have. My father now insists I marry a female half my age so I can father a proper heir and secure our rule over the first house for several more generations. Being chosen to serve the king, oh, here's the other one. Being chosen to serve the king is a dream come true. Even though I grew up poor, I worked hard to support my mother. When my mentor chose me to travel to America with the king, I was unbelievably honored to meet his son, the future ruler of all werewolves. I didn't know how to react when I first laid eyes on Prince Castor, but he cast a spell over me with a single glance, and my life changed forever. I was not only looking at my future king, but the man made just for me. The moment his lips met mine, I knew this story would end horribly, in either heartache or death. Denying destiny is a terrible idea. As desperately as I want to ignore my attraction to the common brown wolf, I cannot. I guess this is from Castor's perspective again, but fuck it, I'm already gone. The moment I saw the warm glow of his amber eyes, the need to take him into my arms and drag him off to my bed was overwhelming. Alas, I have a duty to perform. I said duty. And it doesn't involve the man Mother Nature made only for me. The story won't end well. I just know it. This is a paranormal gay romance with an HEA ending. It's fucking hilarious is what it is. Blurb schmurb. This thing is a riot. It's really good. There's also a lot of... They got the sexy times going on too, but this is Patty Logan at her best. I absolutely loved it to death. Anyways, the story time I did, I think, is from chapter 16, if I'm looking at this correctly. It's been a while since I recorded this. Oh, I'm sorry, chapter 6. Chapter 6. I marked this one specifically from a session. I didn't do my whole intro into it like I normally do, and not at all. In fact, I record all my sessions now, and I just marked this one as the one I wanted to use for a story time. So be aware that I'm not playing to the camera. There's a crowd in Discord, so I talk to them occasionally. Patty was actually in there as well when I was recording this. The end, I think, actually cuts off rather abruptly because it's just the end of that session, so I back out of it. So there's nothing flashy here. This is a real session that you're going to watch, but hopefully it'll give you a taste of the book, and also it'll give you a taste of what it's like to be in a real recording session. So I love you guys. Have fun. Enjoy yourselves. And hopefully you like this. And hopefully this comes out real soon. Chapter 6. Prosper Woods Chronicle. All the advice fit to print. Dear Krabby, I pray you can help. I'm a kindergarten teacher, and I can't stop my children from digging worms from the grass during recess. I even caught some of them trying to eat them. What should I do? I don't want to punish the sweet little darlings. Signed, Anguished Educator. Dear Anguished Educator, while it is unusual for earthworms to eat children, I honestly don't have an answer. This may be a first for Krabby, but I just can't fathom how you'd punish an earthworm. For now, I'd recommend keeping your remaining students inside at recess while formulating a plan to lead the country. I'd choose a non-extradition country and do it before parents start arriving to pick up their kids. Respectfully, Krabby. Krabby's my hero.
I do.
I'm not repeating it, Alyssa. I'm afraid you're going to have to buy the book. You know, I'm the narrator of this book. I just now realized that Krabby was supposed to be a girl. She's not. I'm just saying. It's the 21st century. She can be whatever she wants to be.
Krabby is dear Abby's twin brother.
Exactly. That's the way we're playing it. Look, I got the author in here. I got Trace in here. Nobody stopped me and said, hey, John, that's supposed to be a woman. Now, that means it could be one of two reasons. One, they just don't fucking care. Or two, my female voices are just that bad. I know which one I'm leaning for.
Nobody told me it was supposed to be a woman.
Well, Krabby. Look, Aunt Rosie is the best voice ever done by any actor, ever, anywhere, okay? And you can't take that away from me. When I die, they're going to retire Aunt Rosie. No one else can voice Aunt Rosie but me. Krabby. Doc Brown is pretty good. Krabby. Emery. Wait, X what? I asked, watching them all exchange glances. X what? I asked, watching them all exchange glances. My mate used to date Castor Howard. Oh, Prince Castor. The Alpha, Greg, replied. I turned and looked at the werewolf who'd introduced himself as Sam and noted how sheepish the man looked as he stared at his true mate. Clearly it was the truth, but I couldn't believe it. If this man used to date Prince Castor, then it meant that he was into men and not women. Could that be true? I'd heard of wolves dating both sexes before, but it seemed impossible to think that Prince Castor had dated not only a man, but a man who was not from the nobility, as this man clearly wasn't. He was an ordinary wolf like me, not a dire wolf like every other aristocrat I'd ever met. I'd only seen Prince Castor a couple of times, and I didn't know him at all, but still, I'd never met a dire wolf who slummed with normal werewolves. Maybe he was as different as everyone seemed to think. I needed time to reflect on what I'd learned, but right now, I was having a hard time wrapping my head around the fact that the Unicorn King was the mate of a vampire, creatures I hadn't believed actually existed until now. Who is the woman marrying Prince Castor? The Alpha asked. I smiled, relaxing a little when the conversation wandered into an area I could speak to with confidence. Her name is Lady Penelope McCurdy, and he's the daughter of... Dire wolves are much more dire than regular wolves. A little when the conversation wandered into an area I could speak to with confidence. Her lady is named... A little when the conversation wandered into an area I could speak to with confidence. Her name is Lady Penelope McCurdy, and she's the daughter of Alistair McCurdy, the leader of the McCurdy clan. They've come all the way here from their home in Scotland. I watched the men nod. Is she pretty? The little boy asked, grinning at me with the most adorable smile. His round cheeks were dimpled, and I had the sudden urge to reach out and pinch one of them. I shrugged my shoulders. I've never met her. She's not yet arrived. I held out a hand. But I've heard she's very beautiful, and it's said that she'll easily provide Prince Castor with many sons now that she's old enough. Old enough? The vampire asked. Vincent. His name is Vincent. Oh, yes. The news in the castle was that the matchmaker searched far and wide. Enough, the vampire asked. Vincent, his name is Vincent. Oh, yes, the news in the castle was that the matchmaker searched far and wide and finally found the most beautiful bride in the world for Prince Castor. So, this is an arranged marriage. Oh, this is the Unicorn King, which I thought the kid was, but he found the most beautiful bride in the world for Prince Castor. So, this is an arranged marriage? The Unicorn King asked. I was confused, just like the narrator. The Unicorn King asked. I was confused. He was a king and his son was a prince. How could these Americans not be familiar with tradition? I nodded. Yes, of course. Isn't that the way you choose your mates? You are royalty. My mate is king of the vampires. I am king of the unicorns, but we chose each other, King Rome said. My gaze shot to the vampire, shocked to hear that he was not only a creature I only knew existed in myth, but also that he was the king of the creatures. Your Highness, I said, inexplicably finding myself bowing to the vampire. All of this was strange, and something I never imagined I'd see while out on a run. I straightened and noticed that the female guardian had begun folding up the twister mat they'd all moved off. I'd see while out on a run. I straightened and noticed that the female guardian had been folding up the twister mat they'd all moved off to shake my hand. Well, it was wonderful meeting all of you, I said. I guess I'd better get back to the inn. I should check to make sure the king doesn't need me. It was nice meeting you, Emery, the Alpha said. Sam and I will be over to pay our respects to Castor, Prince Castor. I smiled widely. That would be wonderful. I think the king would like to meet the Alpha of the pack from Prosper Woods. I turned to Sam, and your fated mate. The man smiled, and I blew out a breath, relieved that I hadn't completely embarrassed myself with these kings and the Alpha. Good night. Good night, Emery, they all said. Good night, I repeated, smiling at Hannibal before shifting, turning around and running back into the depths of the forest. It certainly had been an interesting night, and I was looking forward to some restful sleep. The run had done me a lot of good. I wish I would have played Twister. But, I was born in the late 70s and couldn't really get him by the time I was a kid. But it looked like fun. Is it true that y'all used to do that on, roller skates?
No. Hey, I grew up with Twister, and I'm not that much older than you.
I saw it on Little House on the Prairie.
God. It's a good thing I like you.
A lot of good. Seriously, though, that was a good show. A lot of good. Castor. I gazed into the fireplace from under sagging lids, watching the flames blur. Puffing out a breath, I turned and reached for my glass, fumbling a little as I picked it up from the table. It was almost to my lips when I was able to focus on it, noting it was empty. I reached over and set it down on the table just a little harder than I meant to, before reaching for the decanter filled with my favorite, a rare Woodford Reserve bourbon. The moment I lifted it, I noticed how light the crystal vessel felt in my hand. There were only a few drops left, and considering how full it had been when I'd retrieved it earlier from my private bar, I'd had a party all by myself. I stared at the empty crystal with unfocused eyes, almost proud of myself. It wasn't every night I managed to finish off a $2,000 bottle of booze all by myself. I dragged my gaze away and glanced around the room, noting the way my head seemed to move faster than my eyes could focus. For the first time,
I realized I was thoroughly drunk, and a laugh burst out of me before I could stop it. Considering I was werewolf, drunk, and a laugh burst out of me before I could stop it. Drunk, and a laugh burst out of me before I could stop it. Considering I was a werewolf aristocrat and had blue blood running through these fucking veins, that... Oh, I almost belched in the middle of that line. That would have been appropriate. Laugh burst out of me before I could stop it. Considering I was a werewolf aristocrat and had blue blood running through these fucking veins, that was saying a lot. It was almost impossible for one of us to get drunk, but I'd somehow managed to do it in spectacular fashion. I rose shakily from the chair, knowing I needed even more liquid courage if I was going to face my bride-to-be in the morning. My fucking bride-to-be. I got to my feet and swayed a little, bending for a second to hold on to the back of the chair before turning and heading toward the door. I made it in a few halted strides and practically fell against it as I fumbled for the doorknob. I really was more intoxicated than I thought, but I was determined to make it downstairs to procure another bottle for myself, rather than sending a member of staff, or, as my father referred to them, a servant. I appeared to have depleted my own private collection. I braced myself on the wall in the hallway for only a second, then continued, heading toward a bend in the corridor. After making the turn, I spotted one of the servants' stairways at the end of the hall. I made it downstairs, holding onto a railing, and was relieved when the door at the bottom opened out into the kitchen. Since I almost never took the servants' stairways, I wasn't sure where they led. I walked into the kitchen and headed for the pantry, where I knew our cook kept her stock of liquor bottles, growing angry when I found the liquor cabinet padlocked inside the walk-in pantry. Padlocked inside the walk-in pantry. I lifted the lock and growled in frustration, growing angry when I found the liquor cabinet padlocked inside the walk-in pantry. I lifted the lock and growled in frustration, realizing I'd need a key if I was going to gain entry, though maybe a tool would work. A tool. My head felt muddy, but like the competent aristocrat I was, I'd muddle through the mud. I let out another laugh as I formulated a plan. Tools were kept outside in the barn. I headed outside through the kitchen door and stopped as soon as the cool night air hit my face, sobering me just a little. I lifted my head and looked up at the waning moon. It was past midnight. The scent of many unfamiliar werewolves hit my nostrils all of a sudden, and I was instantly on guard before my bourbon-soaked brain remembered that an entire cadre of werewolves were currently here for my soon-to-be nuptials. That meant our barn was full of servants, bedded down for the night. I cursed under my breath, turning to go back into the house and find my bed to sleep it off, when I picked up on another scent. This one was sweeter than any I could have imagined, and it was coming from the direction of the forest to my left. Forest to my left. I turned just in time to see a small light brown wolf come out of the trees. His soft fur shimmered gold with amber undertones in the light of the moon. I watched as he lifted his muzzle to the sky and gazed at the same moon I'd been staring at moments before. He was as beautiful in his wolf form as his scent, and I found myself drawn to him. I began walking toward him as he shifted with his back to me, bending down and reaching for something behind a tree trunk. The man's stunning ass was round and perfect, so tight I just knew he'd be as delicious as he smelled once I got a taste of his skin. I stepped into the tree line, and he suddenly whirled around, holding his clothes in one hand,
Stop.
his eyes
As he suddenly whirled around.
Congratulations, Patty. You've reached level 19. I'm not sure
You pay me, do I have to pay you back? I'm not sure how that works. But, you're going to see my cape closet, and it's fucking outstanding. At level 50, I'll show you something gross, but let's be honest, I'll show it to you before that. It sounds like this. It sounds like...
Ta-da!
That sound can't be used anywhere but at the end of a book. It just doesn't work, does it?
I know. I can't believe you didn't use hers.
I know. Well, I hit the wrong sound is what I did. And I don't know where the crow is. I'll have to find that again.
Oh, no. I was talking about Jesus, Harry Christ.
Oh,
Hers.
I forgot about that one. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I hit the wrong button entirely. What I was going for was Max. I don't like Max. That's what I was going for, but I missed it. I need to put them on the same screen as my normal recording stuff. But anyways, sorry, I digress.
I don't like Max.
See? Exactly. Anytime we can have that. Knew he'd be as delicious as he smelled once I got a taste of his skin. I stepped into the tree line, and he suddenly whirled around, holding his clothes in one hand. His eyes widened as he saw me, and only a moment later, he was on one knee in front of me, head bowed. "Sire, I didn't know anyone was out. Forgive me for not seeing you there. I should have paid more attention," he said to the ground. My head swam, and I realized I was still 3 sheets to the wind as I looked at the top of his head. He was slender for a man, much smaller than myself, with narrower shoulders, and at this angle I could have counted the vertebrae in his bowed back as if I'd... It's definitely bowed there. Definitely bowed. I was still 3 sheets to the wind as I looked at the top of his head. He was slender for a man, much smaller than myself, with narrower shoulders, and at this angle I could have counted the vertebrae in his bowed back if I'd been sober enough to do it. I found myself suddenly desperate to see his face. I was tired of being treated like a prince, everyone scraping and bowing to me everywhere I went. I hated it. "Get up and get the look, baby." Where are you going, Reaper? Great. I hated it. "Get up and let me look at you," I said, hearing the words come out sounding almost slurred. The man raised his head. I want to do it sexier, but I still need to sound drunk. Scraping and bowing to me everywhere I went. I hated it. "Get up and let me look at you," I said, hearing the words come out sounding almost slurred. The man raised his head, and I found myself looking down at the most alluring amber eyes I'd ever seen. They were familiar to me. He stood, appearing nervous when he got to his feet. Once I got a really good look at him, I realized I had seen him before. Up this close, his features seemed to swim before me, and I reached out, grabbing for a tree trunk. I stumbled as I nearly tripped, but he was there instantly, holding onto my waist and helping to steady me on my feet again. A delectable scent of perspiration and sage hit my nostrils, and I realized I'd smelled that before. My mind went back to the scene that had played out in my foyer earlier that day. Was it today? I couldn't seem to string 2 thoughts together. I did remember something about a brief conversation we'd had, but couldn't recall the details. "Your Highness, Prince Castor, let me help you back into the house," the lovely young man said. I dropped my nose into the man's curls and inhaled, breathing in the slightly pungent odor, a clear sign that he'd been on quite a long run. My head filled with images of taking this man to bed and doing the most incredible things to him, and I felt my cock growing hard, even as drunk as I was. I wrapped my arms around him, dragging his naked form against my body as I groaned once again, inhaling the fresh scent of his sweat. "Oh, Prince Castor, He looked up at me, and the golden eyes with long dark lashes framing them were quite possibly the most beautiful eyes I'd ever seen. "You're so pretty," I slurred, reaching up and cupping his cheek as I held him fast against my growing erection. I felt his back stiffen, as though he was uncomfortable in my arms, and that was the last thing I wanted. No, no, pretty one, I'm not going to hurt you. Prince Castor, Your Royal Highness, I shook my head and cut off whatever he was going to say, as I lowered my mouth and began kissing him. When he squeaked, I smiled against his sweet mouth and turned back. Began kissing him. When he squeaked, I smiled against his sweet mouth and turned him until his back hit the tree behind us. He let out the most adorable little...
Beside us.
You know, you keep on correcting me on that. That's like the third time.
As I lowered my mouth and began kissing him. When he squeaked, I smiled against his sweet mouth and turned him until his back hit the tree beside us. As I lowered my mouth and began kissing him. When he squeaked, I smiled against his sweet mouth and turned him until his back hit the tree behind us. He let out the most adorable little...
You keep wanting to say behind us.
It should say behind us. Why would he do it beside him? It's behind him. Everybody's always gone to the side. Doesn't make any sense.
As I lowered my mouth and began kissing him. When he squeaked, I smiled until his sweet mouth... As I lowered my mouth and began kissing him. When he squeaked, I smiled against his sweet mouth and turned him until his back hit the tree beside us. He let out the most adorable little oomp into my mouth, and then my tongue was inside, and I was tasting the sweetness most... He let out the most adorable little oomp into my mouth, and then my tongue was inside, and I was tasting the sweetest, most delicious man I'd ever tasted in my entire life.
There. You happy, Trace? You got your way. Always get your way. No, you're not, Cheryl. Are you drunk already? I know you're Irish, but it's only 3 o'clock.
That made me laugh. And it's actually 1:15 for Cheryl.
See? She's so drunk she can't even tell time.
Life. Emery. This isn't happening. This can't be happening. What in the hell is happening right now? Prince Castor had me pinned against a tree, beside him, not behind him. It was fucked. This can't be happening. What in the hell is happening right now? Prince Castor had me pinned against a tree, and he was kissing me. He was kissing me the way I'd always prayed a man would kiss me. The bold sweep of his tongue as he tangled it with mine, the feel of his incredibly soft lips, the deep growly sound in the back of his throat simply stole my breath. All of that, combined with the hardness of what could only be his thick cock pressing into my stomach, made my own dick hard as he rocked against me, and I was terrified. Prince Castor, please, I managed to say as I pulled my mouth from his, trying and failing to squirm out from between the sharp bark digging into my back and his incredibly sensual body.
Well, at least Declan's getting him some.
Digging into my back and his incredibly sensual body. Digging into my back and his incredibly sensual body. I'd never felt anything like him before, and I realized I wanted him probably more than I'd ever wanted anything in my life. But this was wrong. Prince Castor was about to meet his bride. Oh my God, he was going to leap Lady Penelope in the morning. About to meet his bride. Oh my God, he was going to leap.
Damn it. I really wanted that breath. It was good. All right.
My life. But this was wrong. Prince Castor was about to meet his bride. Oh my God, he was going to meet Lady Penelope in the morning. I had to stop this right now. I reached up and pushed the prince away from my neck, where he had ended a slow, sensual journey, moving from my forward and onto my...
Oh.
All right. He had ended a slow, sensual journey, moving from the prince away from my neck, where he had ended a slow, sensual...
I can do that.
The prince away from my neck, where he had ended a slow, sensual journey, moving from my shoulder and working his way up to my neck by dropping a series of kisses along the way. As hard as I tried, I couldn't move his big body, and the more I tried, the more I realized it was completely hopeless. Judging by the scent of expensive liquor on his breath, he'd no doubt fallen deeply into his cups after dinner. He lifted his head and frowned down at me, looking so handsome I couldn't stand it.
"What is it? You must let me have you,"
he slurred. Your Highness, we can't do this. You are to be married. And He growled and leaned down, kissing me hard before yanking his mouth away.
"Get dressed. We'll discuss this inside."
Well, who was I to argue with the prince, especially one who could snap my neck with his thumb and little finger? I grabbed my jeans and bent, yanking them on before zipping them quickly, and almost before I had my t-shirt over my head, Prince Castor had his large hand around my bicep and was pulling me toward the house. He wasn't steady on his feet, but we managed to close the distance with as much grace as possible and entered the house through the same door in the kitchen I'd escaped from earlier. The room was blessedly empty, absent of any of the folks who'd been there earlier, and I thanked my lucky stars Mrs. Douglas and Teo weren't around to witness the prince dragging me through the house. We stopped at the door to the servants' stairwell. Seeing my hesitation, he grabbed the doorknob and opened the door, swept me up into his arms, and kicked the door closed behind us as he took the stairs. I couldn't believe what was happening. His hold was tremendously strong, and I could tell that the alcohol that had affected him was wearing off as he took the stairs with ease, even with me cradled firmly against his chest. He smelled so good. I wanted to bury my nose against him and keep it there for an eternity. Bury my nose against him and keep it there for an eternity. 2 floors later, we stepped out into the hallway where he set me on my feet. I immediately felt the loss of his strong arms and hard body. Before I could blink, I was being dragged across the carpet towards the... Immediately felt the loss of his strong arms and hard body. Before I could blink, I was being dragged across the carpet toward the king's quarters. I stiffened, almost relieved, knowing we were about to be caught by one of his guards, and terrified of it all at the same time. Right before we got to the king's rooms, he turned and dragged me into another wing of the house, this one far away from the king. I breathed out a sigh of relief until I saw the large double doors which could only lead to his suite. I dug my heels into the carpet runner and tried to stop when he looked back at me. "I can't. Your Highness, Prince Castor, you're to be married. And I'm..." He slammed me against the wall and attacked my mouth, this time taking no prisoners as he pushed his tongue inside and kissed me with a passion I had only known in my own fantasies. I couldn't help myself, groaning as I relaxed against the wall. Then reaching up to twine my hands behind the prince's neck, I was exactly where I wanted to be, swept away by this man's need and lost in his craving for me. When he finally pulled back, his blue eyes were swimming with desire and hot with lust. I knew the look. I'd seen it before in Teo's eyes when he'd told me all the things he wanted to do to me. Somehow, when the bodyguard had said it, the words felt dirty to me, very different, I suspected, than how I'd feel if Prince Castor whispered them to me. "Come," Prince Castor said. "We need privacy." Before I could protest, he dragged me inside his private suite, closed and locked the door. My heart skipped a beat as I noticed the huge bed sitting on a platform adorned with blue velvet hangings which were tied back at the 4 richly carved bedposts. The room was poshly appointed, with hand-knotted Persian carpets, antiques, and paintings on the walls. In a corner stood an easel with an unfinished painting of a family of wolves, and off to the side was an open door to a sitting room with a velvet couch. The room looked like something out of one of my mother's tattered romance paper books given to her by one of her clients.
Stop. Romance paperbacks.
We call them paper books where I'm from. Inside was an open door to a sitting room with a velvet couch. The room looked like something out of one of my mother's tattered romance paperbacks given to her by one of her clients. Before working in the castle back home, I'd grown up reading the love stories of pirates and knights of the Round Table. In those books, there was always some fair virgin falling hopelessly in love with a big, strong man, only to be dragged to a bedroom just like this one, waiting to be ravished. I dragged my gaze back to Prince Castor, who was standing beside his bed shedding his clothes with clumsy, drunk fingers, and my eyes widened as a sudden realization hit me. Holy shit! I'm the fair virgin about to be ravished. I had to get out of here. I ran for the door, but seconds before I made it, Prince Castor was there, pinning me against the cold wood.
"Where do you think you're going, my sweet?"
"Please, Prince Castor, you're about to be married." My words were cut off when he growled, bending and picking me up. He strode across the room and tossed me onto the center of the bed, where I bounced a couple of times before my prone body was straddled by his, caged by strong arms and knees firmly planted on either side of my body. For a drunk dire wolf prince, he sure was quick, and quite determined by the look in his... strong arms and knees firmly planted on either side of my body. For a drunk dire wolf prince, he sure was quick, and quite determined by the look in his eye. I don't know why I missed that word. Strong arms and knees firmly planted on either side of my body. For a drunk dire wolf prince, he sure was quick, and quite determined by the look in his eye and the rampant erection. I only got a glimpse of the goods on offer before he straddled me, but fuck, the wolf was hung.
Oh, motherfucking
Do
Christ.
I want to know what's going on in your head?
No, it's just fucking hilarious. Oh, shit. It's just hilarious, that's all.
Me, but fuck, the wolf was hung. And it's Wolfman has nards. One eye, Jane, yes. He's got one eye like a pirate, you know? Me, but fuck, the wolf was hung.
"Don't speak of her again."
He suddenly paused, cocked his head, and stared down at me before frowning in the most drunken and adorable way. I wanted him desperately. My heart warred with my head, and my emotions were all over the place. I gazed into his eyes, once again awed by how beautiful they were, and how desperately attracted to him I was. Well, maybe this was fate after all. The gorgeous prince literally swept me off my feet and carried me away to his castle. Maybe there will be a happy ending for poor innocent me after all.
What's your name again?
Emery.
I told you, she got wild in this one.
Patty, good job on this one, dude. Good job.
Be a happy ending for poor innocent me after all.
What's your name again?
Emery, I answered before realizing what I was doing. Oh, geez. The spell was broken, and I reached up, pushing at his massive chest. You're making a big mistake, Prince Castor. Let me go before someone comes in and catches us.
Stop. You're making a massive mistake.
It's big. So big. I was broken, and I reached up, pushing at his massive chest. You're making a massive mistake, Prince Castor. Let me go before someone comes in and catches us. I begged and pushed at him again. He was huge, easily outweighing me by 100 pounds of solid muscle. I gave up and dropped my hands, realizing my struggle was futile. I was tiny in comparison to his larger, muscled body. He smiled crookedly at me and sat back on his haunches before reaching for the neck of my shirt. Our gazes locked, and I realized what he was about to do. Only a second before, he ripped my t-shirt from neck to waist with one smooth tear. His gaze roamed over my skin as he separated the two sides, and I was helpless to do anything as I stared at his flushed face.